Good evening, and welcome directly from Milan, Italy. It is 7 o'clock here in the evening, and it must be quite a few hours behind in Brazil. I hope you're happy. It's Friday, and for me, it's the beginning of the weekend, which is the favorite part of my week. So I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar, and I hope that you enjoy listening to me speak about reading culture and sharing with you some strategies on how we can encourage our students or people in our family, children, to create a love of reading, whether they're in primary or whether they're in middle school classrooms. So my name is Sushil Penuti, and in a minute, I'm going to share with you a little bit about myself. But the first things first, I'd like to welcome all of you from wherever you are, from whichever part of the world you are. And I really hope that you're able to learn something from today's webinar. So, my name is Sushil, and what I'm doing here is I'm sharing with you some of my experiences, which makes me really, really happy with all of these years of experience. Nothing to do but to share it with you. And I really hope that this is an interactive webinar whereby you are able to share your experiences as well in your classrooms or even beyond. I have been teaching for quite a number of years now, and I've had the privilege of working in many different countries, most of them in Asia. I'm quite settled here now in Milan, and recently I've been teaching in middle schools, but I've got experience teaching children and adults as well, so across the board, really, from primary all the way to high school and even university. What are we going to be doing today? We're going to be talking about reading, which is a subject very, very close to my heart, simply because I am a book nerd. I have such an obsession with reading. And when I was asked to do this webinar, I thought, no perfect person than myself, Sushil. Now, as far as I'm concerned, reading is very much an important part of all of our lives. What we're going to do is you are going to learn today, by the end of today, how to create an engaging reading environment in your school or wherever you are teaching. And I hope that you'll also be able to motivate your students with diverse materials and support their growth as confident, enthusiastic readers. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to highlight some examples to show you how you can inspire a love of reading for reading that extends beyond the school day. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you love to read? And by the way, before that, please, if you have any questions at all, or if you'd like to include an opinion, feel free to write in that chat box. That chat box is there for a reason. So the first question I'm going to ask you will require for you to write something in the chat box. Let's go for it. When you read, for those of you who love reading, and I've got a great passion for reading, how does that make you feel? Can I ask you to please give me one adjective that you associate with reading? Write it down in the chat box if you possibly can. I'm going to start. Reading relaxes me. It gives me a lot of relaxation. Now, I like that. Someone has said freedom, and someone else has said it makes me feel relaxed. I love that. This is the same way. I feel the same as well. Anybody you would like to share how you feel when you read, if you love reading? Hello from Turkey. Hi. Oh, yes, absolutely. You love reading because you want to learn. You want to learn as much as possible, and you do. It makes you feel focused. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vera, for sharing that. Makes you feel focused. You want to learn. You obviously learn a lot of things. Anybody else? Anyone else would like to share? You feel good? For sure, I never not bring a book, especially when I'm on holiday, and I read about 3 books at the same time. And yes, it does make me feel good. Some of the material that I read are thought-provoking. It relaxes me. The information that I get is transformative. I feel engaged. So many adjectives, imaginative as well. So all of these are fantastic, and thank you so much. Keep them coming if you like in the chat box. All of these are very important adjectives to describe a love for reading. Now, reading is definitely a powerful tool. And another thing I like as well, and I can't see any of your faces, but I'm happy to share this with you. I love quotes. And these are some of the quotes as I was doing research for this webinar. These are some of the quotes that I found on online, and I thought I'll put it in there. There are quite a few of them, but that's how much I like them. So Margaret Fuller. Now, Margaret Fuller came up with the first one: today a reader, tomorrow a leader. And this, I first heard this when Barack Obama, all of you know him, he is such a great speaker, but he is such a reader. So he keeps on expounding this as well, which is really, really true. Simply because reading is such a powerful tool, it shapes not just knowledge, like some of you said here, you want to know things when you read, but also character. So this quote, today a reader, tomorrow a leader, it really highlights the profound impact that reading has on personal and professional development, definitely. And in essence, nurturing a love for reading today not only enriches an individual's lives, but also empowers the leaders of tomorrow. Now, when individuals, when your students or whoever that when they engage with books, they are broadening their horizons. One of you said, because I'd like to learn things. Absolutely correct. They're learning new perspectives and they're developing critical thinking skills. Did you know that reading is associated with thinking skills as well, which is really, really important? What this means is readers actually absorb diverse ideas and experiences, and this also cultivates some soft skills, which are like empathy and understanding. And in a classroom setting, all of you, I think all of you are educators. So in a classroom setting, for example, reading fosters communication skills. It enhances vocabulary and it encourages creativity, all of which are really essential. I have expounded time and time again to my own children. I've got two children, that when you read, you can write. When you read, you're able to answer questions, articulate yourself, and there's so many benefits to just reading. So reading is really like fuel for the mind. It's like breathing in, and writing is like breathing out, as I mentioned. As educators, you and me, we have the privilege of guiding our students through all of these processes. Now, one very famous lady, I'm sure all of you know about her, Malala. Wow, she's got a fantastic story there. She says that just these few things, a book, a pen, a child, and a teacher, can change the world. So what this means is by encouraging a love for reading, we are providing our children, our students, tools to create, to imagine, and to transform. And we have to remind them that reading is a gift. It is not a chore. Therefore, they have to see it as a precious opportunity, not as an obligation. A lot of them do. A lot of them say, not again. I'm not interested in reading. Why do I have to read? Well, I'm going to show you some strategies that can hopefully help you, help your students develop a love for reading, because books and doors are the same thing. When you open them, you are being transported into another world, and that's my sincere belief. Before I move on to the next slide, I have a question for you. And again, I'd like you to write down in the chat book. So if you know and the first person to answer, you absolutely win. So here's my question. When we describe someone as fluent in a language, now it doesn't matter what language. It can be English, it can be Portuguese, it can be, Chinese, any language. When you're fluent in a language, we usually assume that they have a high level across all main language skills. My question to you is, can you think what those language skills are? If you know what they are, write them down right down there in the chat box for me, please. Come on, quickly. Write down in the chat box what you think the main language skills are. I'm going to give you a hint. There are 4 of them. There are 4 language skills. What do you think they are? Please write them down. One of them, who is that? Cassia. Oh, Cassia, that's fabulous. You've written all 4 of them, so you win. Someone else Eddie as well has written, well done. Absolutely correct. The 4 reading skills are reading, speaking, listening, as well as writing. And these are very, very important. Reading is usually the third language skill that you learn in a language, and it comes after listening and speaking. So here we know, I'm just going to move on to the next slide here. So now you know that reading basically transcends everything, class, age, gender, and it does offer every child and every adult a free magic carpet ride to anywhere in the world and beyond. Did you also know that there was a study done on 17,000 people from birth, from when they were born? And this study showed that reading for pleasure improved math skill as well as literacy. So now you're going to ask me, but Sushil, how are we going to do this? How are we going to create a reading culture with our children? How are we going to make them love or fall in love with reading? I've got you there. Now, what we're going to do today over this next 30 minutes or so, this is the agenda that I'd like to share with you. We are going to talk about how we can inspire and support students to read and to read independently eventually. So I would like to talk about what a reading culture is. So we want to understand the concept of a reading culture and its impact on learning. Next, we have to talk about challenges. We are going to talk about the common challenges, such as engaging a reluctant reader. And after that, we'll dive into practical steps for creating a reading-friendly environment, because this is really, really important. What I'd like to share with you, with all of this experience that I've had across so many different countries and so many different schools, I would love to share with you some strategies that you could use for primary as well as for secondary school. And I'd like to offer some insights to support readers at different stages of development. Can we start with what is reading culture? What do you think? Let's look at what is reading culture. Now, the importance of creating a reading culture in schools, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and we're going to also talk about the countless benefits it brings you or the child who is going to cultivate that love for reading. So a reading culture creates an environment where reading is celebrated, it's valued, and actively encouraged across all aspects of school life. I'm going to share with you in a minute what exactly I mean when I say this. One of the benefits you get out of a strong reading culture encourages a love for books, for example, but it also improves literacy skills and it supports students' personal, academic, and social development. I'm quite sure you agree with me on that. So how do we do this, ladies and gentlemen? We are going to integrate reading into daily routines. We are going to provide students with access to diverse and engaging materials. Now, it's not just books. It's magazines, it's comics, it's manga, it's a whole plethora, a whole selection of materials that you can use to foster an atmosphere where both students and teachers actively share, discuss, and enjoy literature. And fostering this culture is key to nurturing well-rounded, successful learners. At the end of the day, I know as an educator, I'm really, really enthusiastic and I want my kids to succeed in life. And one of the ways to do that is reading, which is an integral part of their growth, which means that creating a reading culture in schools is a powerful way to enhance students' learning and foster a positive, engaged community united by a shared passion for reading, of course. So, as a fundamental skill, reading plays, obviously, all of you know, a critical role in the curriculum and extends across all subjects, whether it is math, whether it is history, whether it is geography, etc. Reading plays a key role. Now, I used to teach history in middle school. I am a CLIL specialist, so I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's content learning. What this means is that I teach subjects in English. And history requires for you to read. You need to read about World War I, you need to read about World War II, you need to read about the Cold War and everything that is associated with it. How else will you know the subject matter? So, a child who doesn't read will have difficulty in answering questions when it comes to that time, for example. Now, we have the internet, we've got artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, you are still reading on the computer, or you're still reading whatever articles that is relevant to your subject matter. So that is why I'm here to help you celebrate reading for your children. All right, let's go to the next slide. There we go. Now I'm talking and talking and talking, and you must be thinking, yeah, but Sushil, how do we actually do this? I got you on that one again. So here's the thing. I have, oh goodness, I have been involved in so many different schools. I've worked in Hong Kong. I've worked in Bangkok. Bangkok, they don't speak English at all. Schools, they don't speak English at all. So the level of English is actually pretty low. I myself come from a country called Malaysia, which is in Southeast Asia. Uh, English is obviously spoken there. It's my mother tongue. We used to be a British colony. But a lot of countries in Asia, the level of English is actually still pretty low. I teach here in Italy as well, or rather, I used to teach here in Italy as well. And slowly but surely, programs are being implemented in schools here because they realize the importance of speaking English. As a matter of fact, now in this continent, Italy has surpassed France in schools. I'm talking about in particular for English speaking, which as far as I'm concerned, is really, really good news. So some of the things, and by the way, another thing is because I've lived in so many different countries, my children have also gone to so many different schools in these countries. So I, as a parent, have been involved in these schools, and I learned a lot of what they do in international schools. And this is what I took and I implemented in the local schools where I taught. A few things to do to celebrate reading. Establishing book clubs, for example, or even reading circles. When you do that, you allow for kids. It's not a geeky, it's not a nerd thing to do. No, not at all. Depends on the books you read, of course. So these kids can actually meet regularly to discuss selected books. Encourage them to lead discussions, share whatever they've learned, whatever they've read, and recommend some of these titles to even to peers. Be involved at the very, very beginning, and then let them take it on themselves. What has worked for me, and all of these things have actually worked for me, so I'm sharing all of my experiences. Create a reading wall of fame. That's amazing. You want to showcase students who reach reading milestones or achieve their reading goals on a wall of fame. You know, and I know that we would love to see our name glorified on a wall at the back there, because this recognizes their achievements and motivates others to strive for success. Yes. Another thing that really works, and well, I've tried to implement it here in Italy. They're not very much into dress up, but some I somehow succeeded. Dress up days. So books have got characters, especially children's books have got characters. What you can do is you can organize these days where students can dress as their favorite book characters, and this initiates a discussion. It creates excitement because it's all themed, but this also encourages discussions about books that they represent, obviously. This last one here, the next one that I have down there might be a little bit difficult, but if you have a local author who's written a children's book, for example, it doesn't matter which language, you can always invite him or her, or even an illustrator, one who does the drawings, to speak to students about their work and the writing process, of course, because this can provide inspiration and connects students with real world literary figures. Now, might be a little bit difficult, but never say never. Don't give up without trying. Reading week, or a reading month. You could create this. Dedicate a week or a month to celebrate reading with themed activities such as Mystery Week or Poetry Month or a Fantasy Fest. I don't know. You can come up with so many ideas. You want to include daily events. So the kids are excited to go to school and they know that they've got something to look forward to. You could also invite guest speakers or, book readings or this is when the dress up days could happen during these reading weeks or months. And finally, Schools are now more and more creating awards or recognition for children who have reached a certain level of reading by giving out awards for various categories. And these categories could be most enthusiastic reader, perhaps, or best book reviewer. Why not? Recognizing students for their reading efforts can absolutely boost their motivation. I'm sure you agree with me on that one. Another thing. Oh, this is one that I stole from an international school. Have you heard of it? If you've heard of it, can you just write down a yes or a no in the chat box so I know that you've heard of it? Because it's becoming really, really popular in a lot of schools all over the world. And I think it originated in America, for example. So I sort of stole this idea from my children's school when we were living in, where were we living at that time? Probably in Hong Kong, because we lived in Hong Kong as well, and Singapore. And this particular program was highly, highly successful. So Drop Everything and Read is a powerful initiative, and it's designed to promote reading in schools and create a culture of literacy among students and teachers alike. So what do you do here? You basically, there's a designated time that you create within the school day when everyone, student and staff, stops their activities to just read. So I've seen in my children's school, even the receptionist and the administrative staff, they would just stop whatever they were doing and they would read. So this could be during homeroom, when you just start school. But for me, it would be better after lunch because children, they need a little bit of time, a little bit of respite, and or even a designated reading hour. Any time of the day, you can choose it. So students here can read a variety of materials, including novels, magazines, comics, or even nonfiction, biographies, autobiographies, a lot of them. You can choose whatever it is. They can choose what they want to read, and teachers and staff can participate along students because what this is modeling reading behaviors, and this demonstrates that reading is a valued activity for everyone. Right, let's move on and take a look at some of the components of reading. I'm not going to spend too much of time on this, but we need to know why reading is important. So phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, they all work together to build a strong foundation for literacy. Phonics involves understanding the relationship between letters and sounds, which is essential for decoding words, as you know. Years ago, when I first moved here to Italy, now, I'm not sure if you've been to Italy, I'm sure some of you have. Italians have got a very strong accent, and they don't normally pronounce the H. So, for example, if I would say, "How are you today?" they would say, "How are you today?" So I trained myself in phonics, and I worked in a school here. This was quite a few years ago. I worked in a school here whereby adults would learn English through pronunciation. And phonics played a really, really big part in it. So this is something you can do with your children as well from really, really young. Now, once students master phonics, they develop fluency, which is the ability to read smoothly and accurately with appropriate speed and expression. As fluency improves, learners will expand their vocabulary, which then enhances their ability to understand and use different words in different contexts. Here in Italy, when I taught in the middle school, the first thing I did, every time I entered a new class, I would tell them, by the end of the school year with me, your vocabulary would have enhanced in leaps and bounds because that is absolutely essential for school. And finally, comprehension. This ties everything together, enabling students to not only read the text, but also grasp its meaning, make connections, and think critically about what they have read. Do you agree with me on that? Good. All right, let's move on and let's take a look at this. Now, this is such an essential part of any webinar that I present. The challenges, not only for young learners, but they could be for any language learner. By the way, I have a confession. I am a language learner myself. Now, I speak 5 languages, and none of these languages can be used here in Italy, unfortunately. I've been living here for a few years now, which means that I have had to learn Italian. My husband's Italian, so I speak English with him, but if you're living in this country, you must pick up the language. So I'm a language learner, and I can tell you that there are many, many problems, especially if you're an adult language learner. Let's talk about children. Now, and by the way, please, again, for those of you who have been so good in writing in the chat box, if you have experienced any other challenges that your young learners face, write it down, share this with us, and then we'll talk about it, or I'll talk about it in if I know what they are. So please write down any challenges that your learner, whether he or she is young or older, what kind of challenges do they face? Write it in the chat box. One of those that I've experienced is limited vocabulary. Many young learners, especially in second language, they have a restricted vocabulary. This makes it difficult for them to fully understand texts or express themselves clearly. Now, they may rely on basic words and struggle with more complex language. Guilty. It's happened to me as well, for sure. What about difficulty with pronunciation? For young language learners, correct pronunciation can be challenging, especially when phonetic rules sort of differ between their native language and the new language. Now, it's taken me so long, but I realize that a lot of people outside of Italy, they don't pronounce it as pizza, they pronounce it as pizza. But that's not right, because we have a city called Pisa in Italy as well. I'm sure all of you have heard of that. So pronunciation is essential. It is very, very important. And lots of language learners have this problem, simply because mispronunciations can then lead to misunderstandings and lack of confidence when reading aloud. How many of you have got kids who are just not motivated? They have got no interest at all in reading. Now, that is very, very difficult if you have this problem, because some young learners, they see reading as a chore. It's not engaging, it's not enjoyable, and particularly they struggle with it or find the material uninteresting. My husband reads magazines on cars and dogs. So, well, that's still reading, but a lot of them need to be engaged if they want to enjoy or find the pleasure. And without a strong motivation to read, it becomes harder to develop the habit and to improve their skills at the end of the day. I think that, this is very, very important as well. Sometimes, someone has written in, Eddie, thank you. Oh, a matter of culture. Oh, yes. So what Eddie has said is, in Brazil, it is a matter of culture where Brazilians are not so disciplined when it comes to reading, especially, or just 52% of your population reads, and 71% are children. Eddie, I hope that you can take away some of the strategies here. And I feel that all of you are very enthusiastic educators. And I hope that you're able to implement some of these strategies that you learned today, because I just want to increase that number. I want to increase that percentage that you've written in the chat box there. And I want that 71% to be more than 90% by a certain amount of time, because it is such an important thing. It is such an important thing. And talking about, in Brazil or in Turkey or in Asia or here, sometimes there could be cultural differences in texts. So for learners of English as a second language, as is in many, many parts of the world, reading material can very often contain cultural references, perhaps idioms or contexts that are unfamiliar to them. And this can actually create barriers to understanding and make reading feel more abstract or irrelevant to their experiences. Thank you, Eddie, for sharing these numbers that you've just put in the chat box. If anyone else has got something to share, don't hesitate, write it down in the chat box. And then the other thing that I'd like to talk about is difficulty with grammar. Understanding the structure of a sentence. This is essential for comprehension, and young learners may struggle with grammar and syntax. particularly when sentence patterns in English differ from those in their first language. When I do translations, for example, I have to really understand the context of the sentence and the structure, because sometimes it can be written the other way around and have the same context, of course. So this is really, really important. The other thing is a lot of kids might have attention a deficit. They might have, language disorders, for example, dyslexia, whereby they can't read the material that is given to them, and this could be one of the challenges that students might face. However, there are some strategies to overcome these kind of challenges, for example. So young learners who have shorter attention spans, for example, this makes it difficult to stay engaged with longer or more complex reading materials. Choose materials that are suitable for them, because otherwise they may lose focus easily, especially if they find the text challenging or uninteresting. All of us teachers, we know that from the beginning of the year already. In fact, I customize all of my lessons for children, because schools in Italy are very, very inclusive. So you've got children of all different levels in one class, which I think is wonderful, really. But as a teacher, we really need to customize our lessons that way. And the other thing is inconsistent exposure to reading. Many young language learners may not have the opportunity to practice reading regularly at home, particularly their parents or caregivers do not speak the language they are learning. This lack of exposure can slow progress and limit their familiarity with reading, I have to say. Now, can we break down these challenges very quickly, and can we look at them one by one? Well, I won't spend too much of time talking about them, because I've got other things that I'm actually really interested in sharing with you. So when we talk about limited vocabulary, for example, one of the strategies that I use is I will start talking about keywords. So I will incorporate vocabulary instruction into lessons by pre-teaching keywords. I use word walls, or I create vocabulary games. I introduce new words in context, and I provide a lot of exposure through reading, writing, and speaking activities. And I want to also engage them in active reading. This could be a solution. You encourage students to infer meanings from context and use picture clues, because that can really, really help. With regards to difficulty with pronunciation, use read alouds to model correct pronunciation, for example. Incorporate phonics instruction, language games that also focus on sound recognition, perhaps articulation. Audiobooks, these are fabulous. And speech there's some software that exists now that can also help learners to hear the correct pronunciation while reading along. And there are activities that can create awareness, such as rhymes, chants, songs. And this can help reinforce correct pronunciation in a fun way. Now, when it comes to lack of motivation or interest, so here's the thing. What can you do? You have to work really, really hard with children who are not motivated at all to read. I was the opposite, actually. Growing up, I had a book with me all the time, and my mom caught me many, many times. You know, the cliche of a kid with a textbook and a storybook inside the textbook. That was me, and my mom caught me many times, and she used to complain to the teachers about me. And the teachers used to tell her, Madam, but you're lucky. Your child likes to read. Do you know how many kids we have in class who hate reading? So there's so many kids out there. I mean, look, there is the internet, there is social media, there is TV, there are so many things with moving pictures and sounds, and they prefer that to reading. So what we want to do here is we want to provide a variety of engaging and relevant materials that can cater to a student's interests and reading levels. For example, you like dogs? Let's get books on dogs, or let's look at a magazine on the various type of dog breeds that exist. Or you like cars, for example. My children love cars, or football, sports. So get them different, like relevant materials that can create interest and sort of like increase their reading levels. Even graphic novels, I have to say, e-books, electronic books that are interactive. You can ask them questions, or they can provide an answer. look for a topic that they love and enjoy. So you allow your students to actually have some choice in what they read. So they foster ownership of their learning. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does. The other thing you could do is you could implement reading challenges or incentives, and this could spark interest and enthusiasm, of course, for books by having by sharing this with the children, for example. So these kind of challenges and incentives, I have to say, they might work in a big way to sort of like create that spark of love of books with your children. Now, when we talk about cultural differences, now this I love, because I've thought in so many different countries, and I've been exposed. I've been really, really fortunate. I've been exposed to so many different cultures. Now, choosing reading materials that reflect a variety of cultures and backgrounds, wow, that's fantastic. The world is becoming smaller now. I mean, wouldn't you like your kid to know about, what's happening in Asia or in North America, for example, or even in Australia? So it doesn't matter. All of these could be unfamiliar cultural references, but you could have fun by, helping them navigate this and explaining to them or connecting them to familiar experiences in your country. I would incorporate multicultural books that represent different perspectives to foster discussion, really, about cultural differences in the context of stories. What do you think? I think that is a pretty good idea. Now, another thing, difficulty with grammar, which is a big thing, really, because, how can you help a child who has difficulty with grammar? Scaffolding. Scaffolding it works wonders in any language, especially in the English language. So I would use scaffolded sentence structures to help students. So you build it up basically to help students understand English grammar and syntax. So you introduce grammar in the context of reading rather than in isolation. You can engage in sentence building activities or games. And this way they can understand sentence structures. So you're reinforcing correct syntax, really. Provide them with model sentences. Encourage students to experiment with constructing their own sentences. Make grammar practice part of their reading experience. Now, there's other thing here. How do you manage children with ADHD, for example, those who have problems with attention, or those who have anxiety? They can't get the sentence correct. They have problems articulating themselves. So this is what I do, and I'm sharing my experience with you because I think it's really important. You need to break reading tasks into smaller, manageable chunks. And then gradually you increase the time spent on focused reading. What you can do is use interactive reading techniques like predicting outcomes. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. Asking questions during reading. I wonder how, all of these things during reading, or using even visual aids to maintain engagement. What I used to do with the smaller kids, I used to use movement-based activities. Have you heard of TPR, total physical response? So with the smaller kids here in Italy, I would use my hands. I use my hands a lot anyway. I've been living in Italy for too long. As you know, they use their hands a lot when they speak. So I would use my hands to, for example, this is I love you. That's the simplest I can tell you. But there are many ways of actually using movement-based activities to create or to have to increase the attention and focus levels of your students, and also their lack of confidence. This you can help them with. So what do you do with the lack of confidence or with anxiety? This can be a problem for a lot of kids. You need to create a supportive an environment that's non-judgmental. Mistakes are seen as part of learning, for example. So what you can do is, and what I've done, and which has worked very, very well, use small groups or pair your children up together. Make them read together. So this lowers the pressure of reading aloud in front of the entire class. You could also provide frequent positive reinforcement to celebrate small successes to build confidence. So you create reading buddies basically, or peer support systems to make reading a less stressful and more enjoyable experience. I'm not sure if any one of you have actually implemented that, but this really, really works. Let's talk about this inconsistent exposure to reading. Now, I come from a family of non readers. Yes, my mom reads now, but before I used to get in trouble a lot when I was little. But that doesn't matter. I still, had the love for reading. But a lot of families here, they don't really, there's no modeling behavior. Children don't see their parents reading. They see their parents tired after work, sat on the sofa, just watching, whatever's on TV. So this leads to inconsistent exposure to reading. What you can do is you could, as a teacher, as an educator, you could encourage at-home reading by providing students with accessible books. So it could be either physical or digital. I'm not sure how it is in your country. Try to involve your parents, the parents of your children, through reading programs. And I don't know, try to create workshops maybe. Suggest daily reading routines. So what you could do is also you could also have a reading log, and parents need to sign off, which means that parents get involved. So your child reads, or your parent or the parent sits next to the child while the child reads, and then signs off, so you know that child has read. Well, at least you hope that they have read. So set up a reading log or even reading apps, which exist these days, that students can use at home to track their progress and to stay motivated. Right. Do we have time? Am I going on and on? Okay, I'm almost finished, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that you are gaining some, information that you could use in your classroom in the future. And because the thing is about reading is, if kids don't read at that age, they will have difficulty with higher order thinking skills, analyzing, inferring, predicting. All of these are processes that are very, very important that you get during guided reading sessions. So, you could also ask your students open-ended questions. What is this book about? What do you think? Who do you think the protagonist or the antagonist is? You have to do a lot of work, I have to say, if you want to have a very successful reading program or culture in your school. Here, I'm going to show you now what I do. This next slide, it really shows how the strategy that I use to boost reading skills with my kids in whether they're in primary or whether they're in secondary school. This particular book here is actually from the company I work for, which is called Ellie Publishing. And this book was created by Jane Cadwallader. She is a fantastic author. I love this book. It was actually a winner. It was a winner. It won a really big award, an ELT award. And you're familiar with books. So books have got the cover, and the illustration of the cover is generally very, very beautiful, very, very colorful. And then it has got the back part of the book as well. The back part of the book will generally be a summary of what the book is all about. Don't underestimate the back and the front of the book. This is really, really important. So look at the cover of the title, because what you want to do here is you want to predict the story, or rather you want your kid to predict the story. So the title here says Our Water, Our World. What do you think it's about? Why are these three kids holding, these things? One is a tap and a few other things as well. Glance at the words inside the book. Look at the title, look at the picture, glance at the words. So what we're doing here is this. The children will need high levels of literacy in so many aspects of their life, simply because everywhere they look, there's a sea of information for them to digest. Whether it's in school, whether it's at home, on public transport, on the roads, digital technology, did I say? All of these interfaces, they are exposed to this every single day. I have spent a lot of time with students, even good readers, who have struggled with comprehension. So that is why I want to share with you this wonderful technique that I didn't come up with it, but I know many, many educators have used this wonderful technique, which has 4 steps. First one is predict, that you see them. And the second one is, what's happened here? Hold on. And the second one is, so we've got predict, we have question. You want the kids to be able to question, clarity, and summarize. And you can use this for any text that your students are reading, and you will see a huge difference in their reading comprehension, especially if you do it consistently between now and the end of the school year. So to engage young readers and support their comprehension, we can use a variety of interactive strategies like what I've written on the screen that you can see here. As I mentioned earlier, you want them to predict the story, what the story is about, by examining the title, looking at pictures, and glancing at keywords. As they read, clarify tricky words, circle those tricky words, sounding them out, and discussing their meaning together. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide here, because this is another book that I'd like to share with you. Again, another winner from Ellie Publishing. If you have our catalog, take a look at these books. They are fabulous. I have gone through, I love to read children's books as well. So I love to read books. I mean, even for teenagers, I read books for everyone, literally. And this particular book I really, really like, because the author, Michael Freeman, this is his story. And hey, that could be a talking point. You tell your kid this book was written, this author actually experienced everything that he has written in this book. So you want to ask them to look at the cover and then predict the story, but you want to, how do you incorporate all of these different reading methods? So you read it together, and then you take turns reading as well. Have the child read silently, or the teacher, like yourself, reading it aloud. And this actually helps to enhance fluency. Reading in unison is actually particularly beneficial for improving pace and expression. And then what you can do as well is you can ask questions, because you want to check their understanding of the book. Who is this boy on the cover of the book? Why is he set far away from the other kids who are playing? What do you think is happening? Where do you think he is? What are those children doing? So you can pose open-ended questions such as, I wonder. And after reading, ask your students to summarize what they've learned by sharing their favorite part, or perhaps even listing 5 facts they discovered. And these steps not only build comprehension, but they also foster critical thinking and engagement with the text. So I've shared this first book over here, which is one of my favorites, which is, by the way, also very, very relevant today, because as we talk about climate change every other day, there's something in the news. This particular book is very, very important as well for understanding about what's happening in the world. So your kid will, it will sort of trigger a lot of discussions for your kid. And this one, for example, is something that is highly relevant in every school and everywhere in the world. Somebody, even as I'm talking to you today, is experiencing bullying. And this particular story is about bullying. So a very relevant topic, I would say, for your children. Right. I want to show you this book as well, because what we've done is the first 2 books that I've shown you are for primary school children. But at Ellie Publishing, we've got books for across the board, all the way up to adult as well. And this particular book is for a teen reader. So, if you've got teens, or if you are teaching teens and you want to talk about, you want some strategies of how to foster a love for reading, this particular book, you can see that there's already some information on the back part of the book. And I want to also tell you that they come with audio files. Now, audio files are becoming very, very important these days. There are a lot of people. How many of you listen to podcasts, for example? How many of you, when you're driving, you're listening to the radio, but you're listening to what the DJ is saying, as well as the music, of course. So a lot of listening activities as well that are related to reading, obviously. And all of our books come with audio files. So, this is also very, very important for your children. they can read aloud, have listen to whatever is being whatever is being, whatever is coming out of the audio, and then I can actually follow the text on the book. And this really helps, especially for those with learning difficulties. So uh, I'm going to now, we've just got a few more minutes. I'm just going to summarize what we've learned today, what I hope you've learned today in this webinar. What we've done is, ladies and gentlemen, we have explored various strategies to foster a love for reading, and more importantly, to also enhance comprehension in young learners. We talked about activating students' prior knowledge to encourage predictions about the text, setting the stage for the lesson, and introducing the topic, what you're going to talk about, quite effectively, I have to say. Now, one of the ways to keep your students hooked, to keep them hooked and engaged, it may be important to relate the topic to their own lives. The book that I showed you earlier, bullying, oh, that was a big topic in the schools that I was teaching. Bullying, girls and girls, boys and boys, girls and boys, so it is very, very relevant. And um, you could use this to relate it to their own lives, for example, which, by the way, will then help generate essential vocabulary. I'm huge on vocabulary. Every time I teach a new word, I'm writing it on the board and they're writing it in their books. And they're going to construct a sentence and they're going to tell me in the next class to engage and to remember what that sentence or what that phrase was all about. So this is really, really important. Throughout the reading process, students should be given the opportunity to read silently, aloud in class, with the teacher, or in group settings, depending on how anxious they are or how confident they are. Now, I'd like to talk about narrative reading, because narrative reading encourages the students to preview the material before diving in. They can decide, oh, I like this book. I like the sound of this book. Now, when I was teaching here in Italy in the middle school, there were a couple of teachers who were just all out wanting to implement reading programs in their classrooms. And what they would do is they would get the students, bring your favorite book in class, bring any book you like, favorite book in class. And one of the professors, Professor Molino, I remember her, she would set up the library right in front where the blackboard, or in these days it's actually a whiteboard, where that was located. And I remember every time I used to teach, after my lessons, some of my kids would come and tell me, we love that area where the books are, simply because if we get distracted during the lesson, we're looking at that area and we're trying to decide, okay, which book am I going to read next? Which, by the way, is the best kind of distraction you want in your child. So coming back to implementing reading programs or reading club or creating a library, use that as an example, as a really good idea if you want to enhance the reading culture in your school. So once a kid is reading, you want to encourage them to underline words they didn't understand, for example. You want to allow them to discuss the definition of these terms. And additionally, if you could incorporate, I don't know, audio elements, like, in these books that I just showed you, you want to have students listen and read along, or, in a group setting, or as well as in a twosome perhaps, that could really, really work. So don't forget, at the end of it, what is important is you want to do a comprehension check, simply because you must see if they've understood what they have read. There are different ways to check comprehension, of course. Ask them questions, build up a sequence of questions. This is really, really important, because the goal is not only to instill the love of reading, but to make sure they've understood whatever they've read, of course. Now, I am actually at the end of my webinar, and I really, really hope that you've enjoyed listening to what I've had to say. And I have to tell you that I've enjoyed sharing my experiences with you. I am really, really fortunate, because I have a lot of enthusiasm for education. I believe that it is absolutely essential, but you must help your students help themselves sometimes. And I hope these strategies that you've taken away will help you in, in creating an amazing reading culture in your classroom. So, with that, I thank you very, very much for your time. And I'd like to assure you that if you want a copy of this presentation, you will definitely be able to get it from the distributors Disal. If you have any questions, you can always put it in your chat box. Otherwise, I'm going to wish you buonasera from Milan, Italy. Until the next time, I look forward to seeing you all again with perhaps another topic that is interesting. And if you have any ideas, ask away. Okay? Thank you very, very much, everyone. Lovely, lovely to see all of you. Have a wonderful weekend. Ciao, ciao.